So I'm really thrilled today to have our distinguished panel members with us. They are award-winning writers and producers of The Simpsons, Futurama, The Big Bang Theory, and other shows. And so popular culture can reveal, reflect, and even shape how society views mathematics and science. And these shows showcase many hundreds of mathematical moments. Our panelists also hold an impressive array of degrees in mathematics, computer science, and philosophy, among others, as you can see on the slide over here. So what I'd like to do is bring up our panelists and have you welcome them, and then I'll individually introduce them and we'll get the panel going. So thank you, panelists, for coming.
Free water.
I just want to say I was distinctly promised no philosophy majors.
So I'd like to start with Eric Kaplan, who has a PhD in philosophy, to go right off what you said, Elgene. And there you go. And so as I introduce each of you, what I'd like you to do is tell us something that you worked on recently. It could be one of these shows or something else. So Eric, something that you've worked on recently.
That's sort of a tough question. Recently, I've been working on the show Young Sheldon, which is about a young nerd.
Only a philosophy major would hear the question, what are you doing recently, and say, that's a tough question, by the way.
I'll take that as license to philosophize. On the board, Albert Einstein was quoted as saying a couple times that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And if you think about it, why would he say that? So, we would wonder, Einstein is such a smart guy. Why would he say the most incomprehensible thing about the universe that it's comprehensible? I'm sure we could go around the room and we could think of 50 more incomprehensible things about the universe than that it's comprehensible. But recently there was an auction and someone sold a piece of paper upon which Einstein had written The Secrets of Happiness. And you're like, well, why would Einstein write The Secrets of Happiness? It's because he needed to tip somebody. By the way, this is not a joke, this is true. He needed to tip somebody, and he was too cheap to tip him in money. And instead, he wrote The Secrets of Happiness because he didn't want to tip him, presumably a quarter or something like that. So we know that in addition to inventing relativity, Einstein was super cheap, and he would, instead of paying money, which people wanted, he would come up with these proverbs, these sort of fortune cookies. And that's the explanation for why he said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible, which seems false.
Okay, let's go to David X. Cohen.
Wow, I can't follow that. But by the way, I have seen Matt Groening pull that same tip trick with a doodle of Bart.
Oh, really?
Yes, because once I went to Santa Monica Pier with him and he forgot his money to park.
Forgot it?
So he paid in the form of a doodle of Bart for his parking. But anyway, so it works. You should all try it. It always seems to work for Matt Groening and Einstein. So, I'm David Cohen. I've worked on the shows you just saw, and I'm now working on a new Matt Groening show called Disenchantment, which is going to be an animated show on Netflix in about a year. And Josh Weinstein, who Simon mentioned earlier, is the head writer for that. And Patrick Verone is over there, is working on it as well. So that's me.
And David has a bachelor's degree in physics as well as a master's in computer science. So Ken Keeler has a master's degree in electrical engineering and a PhD in applied mathematics. Ken, what have you been working on lately?
I am blissfully semi-retired from writing. I left Los Angeles 5 years ago. I live in North Carolina, and I spent almost that entire 5 years building a coffee roaster that still doesn't work very well, but I'm very, very, very happy to be doing that and not thinking either about jokes or about Goldbach's conjecture, which bothered me for the first 40 years of my life.
But you also contributed some to the Radio-Rama podcast recently, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, we did that, right. Yes, there was a Futurama podcast released recently, a full episode, 45 minutes, double episode, really. It's great. You can download it everywhere, right?
Wow, that's the most enthusiastic I've ever heard. Ken Keeler.
It's not really very good, but
It's
you
free,
can download it free.
but it's free, speaking
Yes,
of
and
free.
long.
So Stewart Burns has a master's degree in mathematics. Stewart, what have you been working on?
I guess like recently, like the last, I don't know, 15 years, The Simpsons. So, more recently I made a baby. That's
Could you explain how you did that?
I never figured it out. A lot of stuff happened.
And I'm pleased to introduce Al Jean, who has a bachelor's degree in mathematics.
Yes, I'm kind of the lunkhead of this panel, and I've been working at The Simpsons since 1989 when I was 6, and I don't want to patronize, but USC sucks, doesn't it?
And last but certainly not least, Jeff Westbrook, who has bachelor's degrees in physics and the history of science, as well as a PhD in computer science.
And a master's. Let's keep the total good here, because I think I win. And I've been working on The Simpsons now for 11 or 12 years, I think, and before that Futurama, and then before that for a few years at Yale University. I'm still trying to get back there if anyone's.
What network was that on?
Yeah. I guess recently I wrote an episode where we had some fun with colleges, and Homer ended up teaching at the local for-profit college. And at the end of it, he was taken off into the far wilderness. Have you ever seen the movie Ex Machina? It was kind of a parody of that. And there was an evil genius out there who was trying to use him to teach what turned to be robots to become perfect students, with the goal that they would then apply for student loans, which he would then funnel through all his universities. So that's my view of college.
Excellent. So to put some of these shows in bigger context, The Simpsons has been on since 1989, as we've heard a couple of times. It's an animated sitcom. Futurama began its run in 1999, and an animated science fiction show, and has been off the air and on the air, and has found new life in a variety of contexts. And The Big Bang Theory is the youngest of the three shows, began in 2007, just celebrated its 10th anniversary. And so I went back to take a look at some of those early episodes of each of the three shows, and we saw in the clips that David brought that RDRR joke from season 1, episode 2, in early 1990. But actually, each of the three shows in those very early episodes have mathematical references embedded in them. So what I'd like to do is have those who would like to talk about it is tell us a little bit about some of your motivations for including math references in the shows.
Well, I think it was what Simon said, which was that we found that we could put more information in the show than we ever were able to, put in the mouth of like Johnny Carson or whoever we worked for before, and we.
Sorry, Mr. Carson.
We found that we could stick math jokes in, and it wouldn't detract from the enjoyment of the show, which, these animated shows are, watched by kids, and they're not going to know what a Googleplex is. But then when I was a kid, I watched the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and I loved it. There were jokes in that show that I didn't understand until I was an adult, and it just, enriched my viewing and made me love it all the more.
But it is, I've thought about it before, there's not a huge benefit to the shows from putting these jokes in. Like we don't get any kickbacks from the UCLA math department. Although if somebody wants to institute that program, we'd be up for it. But I think it's largely for our own entertainment, really, where it's like there's this number that's going to be on the screen that's going to be a random number of a taxi cab or whatever. So we just say, well, let's make it something we like, and if someone happens to notice it, good for them. But at least we'll have a distraction in our day.
Is that a nice way of saying showing off?
Showing off.
Showing off, yeah. Trying to make people think we're smart. I don't know.
I think
It's not working.
It's not working. I don't mean to be reductive.
I think also sometimes it's just 8 o'clock at night and we need to get one more joke or we're not going home, and you really grab at whatever you got. So if
And the other
you know
thing,
math and the guy you're pitching to knows math, then you can pitch a math joke, and if that happens to be the one that you come up with, and that gets you out.
That's even more
it.
reductive.
And if you know math and the guy you're pitching to doesn't know math, then that's very bad.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you could assemble a panel of other kinds of nerds from The Simpsons as well. Like there are millions of jokes about the presidents of the United States, for example. I'm looking at Patrick Verone, who's a presidential scholar. But you happen to have picked this group of nerds, but really there's a lot of people with different interests, and they're all trying to cram all this stuff in. And that's one of the things that makes the show great, is that there's so many specific references to whatever the writer's peculiar interests are. So you got the math people today, but this same panel could be going on in thousands of locations at the same time on different subjects.
There's also a feeling, at least for me, that the country has spent a fair amount of money on my education, all of which has turned out with me sitting here on a panel talking about jokes. So maybe if I can stick a joke in there about math, I've paid you guys back somehow. I don't know. So.
I was excited by the growth of the internet, and I thought, oh, I'm going to put a joke about Frege into the Big Bang Theory. It's going to be the first reference to Frege in any sitcom, at least on CBS. And I will put it out, and then the next morning, my email will be flooded with all the Frege fans out there who are like, great, finally Frege is on TV. And that didn't happen at all. And then I was like, oh, I don't need to wait for them to send the email to me. I'm sure amongst themselves they're buzzing. All the Frege Appreciation Society of Orange County, that people like, I saw something on TV last night, I think you'll really enjoy it. It was Frege on TV. So I searched Frege, Big Bang Theory, misspelling all it was a proverbial rock in the well of Mordor, right? Not Mordor. What was the place where they dropped the rock?
I don't know who Frege is.
No, come on, Moria. Yeah, it was a drop in the mines of Moria.
But that
Has just gotten too
that
weird.
drop brought the Balrog out. So
I
I mean,
know.
so I don't understand your analogy.
I think this audience here today is the Balrog.
So we've spent quite a bit of the last hour plus in Simon's talk on Futurama and The Simpsons, but Eric has also brought along a clip from The Big Bang Theory. So it showcases one of the ongoing themes and tensions in the show. That is the difference between what some call the soft sciences, that is biology, where a lot of the women in the show do the work, and the hard sciences, where the men are spending most of their time. So Mark, let's go over to that clip that Eric brought us. So Eric, you already mentioned a little bit of your motivation about that reference, but any other comments you want to make about what was going on in the writer's room as you were working on that scene?
What was going on in the writer's room as we were working on that scene? I thought what was funny was these two people were having a fight as to who would sort of be top dog in their relationship, and it was being played out in an argument about whose form of science better explains the other person. So I thought that was kind of neat. And I guess something like that was happening in the writer's room. I was trying to show that my way of writing could better address this issue than the other writers. So it was sort of life imitating art.
So, and let me open up a question to everybody. Are there similarities between the creative process of writing and the creative process of mathematics, or philosophy, or computer science?
I thought it's the case. When you're writing a proof, you're trying to come up with this single unique explanation of something that's, when you get it, very beautiful. And when you to write a joke and you get the laugh, that comes with the punchline, it's really exciting, and that justifies my expensive education.
But I think it's that my first answer is no. They're not really that similar, but there is something structurally similar, which Simon Singh got at a little bit before, that thing about bumbling around in the dark, which is that often in both cases in science, in math, you're trying to prove something and you know what that statement is, but you don't know how to get there really. And that is somewhat similar to the process of writing, in the sense that we often have either an ending for the script or even a fact we need to get across in the line, but we need to think of a joke that conveys that information. And you kind of just have a confidence that you're going to find a way to get to your destination, but you're sort of feeling around in the dark till you get there. So that's my stab at a connection.
Yeah, I would add to that, actually, that I think one of the things you learn to do in math, or most of the sciences, is to just keep trying hypotheses to try to get to where you think you need to be. And I can tell you, having tried to find the joke for 4 hours straight, that happens. I would add, I'd forgotten about this. In addition to, Simon mentioned briefly, we wrote an episode of Futurama that involved mind switching and involved some group theory and theory of the permutation group. I'd also written... oh,
good.
Now you can actually hear that. Okay.
Start over again.
Okay.
In addition to that use of the permutation group, I'd written an episode of another show, The Naked Truth, that involved a Christmas gift exchange, a Secret Santa. And we wanted to make it interesting. And to go away again? I ended up writing a graph on the board of, who had to give a gift to the next person in order to make the plot actually function in an interesting way. Like, it wouldn't be that interesting necessarily if two people were just exchanging. You wanted a chain to be able to follow it. And it helped me, as strange as it sounds, thinking back on it, it actually helped me to draw the picture and think, all right, how can we make this chain of connections actually give us an interesting story flow? So that's an obscure and perhaps one or two time thing that has happened. It's not conventional, but that is one way that math has helped me anyway, structure plot.
I'll have a little story too about math involving my daughter, who's here today, which is, I was excited. We got a good rating, and I said it was a 1.6, and she goes, out of 2? And I said, no, actually, out of 100 is what that would be. And she goes, oh, that's good, I guess.
Didn't used to be. But.
Yeah. I'll just mention one thing. There's a famous mathematician, Paul Erdős, Hungarian combinatorist. I believe this is his quote, but he said, that every mathematician before she or he is born is given a glimpse of God's book of perfect proofs. So God has this book of great math proofs, and every proof is perfect. It's as elegant and as small and precise as you can get. And he said the rest of the mathematician's life is spent trying to remember what that book was and get that proof down and try and find that perfect, elegant thing. And a lot of telling a good joke is also finding the perfect, elegant way to put that joke together as concisely. And, so, perhaps we all saw a glimpse of God's books of jokes before we were born.
I think an interesting thing about jokes is that once you really, really, really get them and you've really incorporated them into how you look at life, I think they're not funny anymore. So I think one of the things about jokes, and probably philosophy and perhaps math, is that once you're done with them, they seem like they were obvious all along. And the sort of exciting thing about being involved in coming up with jokes or coming up with philosophy is that you're in the middle. You're sort of floating between the time this time in the future when it will be completely familiar and not funny at all, and the time when it was utterly bewildering and not funny at all. And you're kind of trying to navigate that period of flux in between the utter blank confusion and it just being something that's obvious to everybody and not funny anymore.
Yeah. I also kind of want to address the converse of this, because we always get like, oh, how is writing like math? But I think there's a sense that math is actually like writing, that you do a proof, and this doesn't happen a lot because you get your proof done and you get your, oh, good, I'm finished. But a lot of times you're like, that really wasn't as good as it could be. And I feel like we've even done that in the Futurama room once or twice, kind of solve something and go, that's not really as pretty as it could be yet. And, we throw out stories and try to redo them and make them better. And I think maybe I didn't do that as much in math as I should have. But in hindsight, I'd like to go back and look at all the shit, and I think I could do a lot better.
David, do you want to talk about the brains versus the Nibelonians? No.
What regard?
Oh, I thought it was pretty cool that you said the brains are trying to understand everything theoretically, and the Nibelunians are trying to tell fun stories, and it kind of symbolized your own personal struggle and journey.
Why?
Is that not true? Was it a different David?
I mean, I like everything I'm hearing.
Nice.
Wait a minute. I want to go back. I think you're completely wrong.
Completely wrong.
Yeah, completely. I don't think it's true that a joke ceases to be funny when you completely understand it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I have found one of the really worst writers I ever worked with said two really insightful things about writing, and one of them was that
You can say it's me.
Yeah.
One of the worst writers you worked with, present company accepted.
no, I don't recall you ever saying anything insightful, so it's not you.
This is like professional
It was
wrestling.
just sitting out there. Come on. What I'm trying to say is what this writer said was genius, he said, in comedy writing is the joke that you never could have thought of yourself. And there are jokes like that all the time where I see it's written. I said, no, that joke I could have thought of. That I could see. Yeah, I can see where that's going. And then there's occasional jokes, and I don't have an example at the top of my head, where you just say, how the hell could anyone think of that? And I'm reminded of that because of what Simon was saying about Ramanujan. I had occasion to use one of his results very indirectly once, which is the asymptotic expansion for the number of partitions of n, additive partitions of n. It's a moderately interesting function. He found an approximation for it, and you look at the approximation, and it's incredibly exact. It's a simple exponential function of something like the square root of n, but there's constants in it that don't make any sense, and you stare at that and say, it's not so much that he proved that this is true, as how could you possibly have thought of that in the first place? How could you ever come close to that form? You can look it up. It doesn't make any sense. That reminds me a lot, as I say, of there are jokes where you just say, I don't see how they could have thought of that. It's perfect. It's perfect in its form, and I'm always going to enjoy it. So you're wrong.
I would argue, if I were called upon to argue, that because it's so alien that there's a part of you that hasn't quite assimilated it, and each time you look at it with fresh eyes and you re-experience encountering something new. But we could agree to disagree, I suppose.
Can I just say, this is, if you were ever wondered what it was like to sit in the Futurama rewrite room, I am in the seat right now, which is re-experiencing. These guys would debate like this every day for many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to add that Ken was known to usually be the victor of almost any debate. Mm-hmm. Not always, but often enough that we had a special song called the Victory Over Keeler Song when he was defeated in a debate. So.
Rarely sung.
So to piggyback off what David just said, some people view mathematics as a solitary endeavor. We saw that picture of Ken working on the Prisoner of Benda episode with the body switching, again, solitary in front of a board. But could you talk about that interplay between, especially as it applies to comedy writing, collaborative nature versus solitary work?
Well, this is the one place I can name up this. I actually had Andrew Wiles as a professor in college, and when I read Simon's book, he worked on that problem alone for years and years, not knowing if he would ever find a solution because nobody had for 300 years. And that was why I decided not to be a math major. One of the best things about being a comedy writer is that you get these really, really funny people that you're with. And so whatever's happening, there's really funny things that they're saying to you about it. And, it isn't just work. I mean, it's a great group of people to be around. And so I'm saying, leave math.
But of course, many mathematicians work collaboratively. In fact, didn't some of you work together on mathematics?
Should we all talk about why we left math? That'd be nice.
I mean, obviously, that was you're quoting a very unusual mathematical process there. On the other hand, because certainly there's a lot of collaboration in math.
Yeah, he wanted to be the guy too. It was, secret because he wanted the credit which he deserved when he finally got it. And in fact, it was tricky because he had a hole in the proof, so he put it out, and then he was, his whole life was shattered because he could not actually defend it. And then he worked on it again and realized there was a way of hooking up what he had done before with something he had looked at a lot earlier. And he started, this movie's great, based on Simon's book. He just said he started crying. He was so happy. It was the most beautiful moment of his life. And and that's a plus for math.
It's all right to cry. Might make you feel better. Right? I think I'll talk about philosophy because I don't know anything about math. I think it's inherently sort of collaborative, even if the collaborators are housed within your own body. Like even if it's two different ways that you have of looking at something, because it kind of goes back to this Socrates stuff, which was inherently like approaching people and asking them why they think what they think.
Maybe it's like, movie writers write alone a lot. Mm-hmm. And so every so often there's like a really great movie that's one guy's vision. And every so often there's Andrew Wiles that does this whole thing by himself. But, most of the time movies kind of suck now, I feel like. And I think a lot of good math comes with collaboration. And at least if you get stuck, talk to somebody else.
Well, but wait a minute, though. I mean, I like writing in the room, but there's also, I don't know if everybody else feels this way. Do you hate when you're out on script working by yourself?
No, it's great. Because then you get to hey, look, I did something, and then you come back and it's torn apart.
Should we just say what the process is of writing the scripts for these shows, at least all the ones we're talking about, the animated shows, is basically a hybrid system where one person goes out and writes the first draft of the script, and then it comes into a room full of people. Maybe somebody mentioned this before, but then it's gone over in great detail and largely rewritten by a group of people. So it's very, very collaborative, and most of the work we do is in a group on the writing stuff.
Yeah, in Big Bang Theory, it's even more collaborative, that the stage of going out and writing the script has been eliminated, and everyone just sits around the table, and literally there's a blank screen, and we're like, well, I don't know, maybe he comes in holding a duck. Well, what a duck, what a chicken.
Can I ask you a quick question, Eric, about a story I heard about you at the Big Bang Theory relating to science?
Yeah, but I don't guarantee to either answer it or answer it honestly, but go ahead.
Well, again, it's one of those, is this true thing? Because you just said you don't know that much about math, but I heard it claimed that in the Big Bang room, you're the science guy.
Well, yeah.
And that you pitched some very scientific, long, terminology that went into the script, and then later someone said, how did you know that? And you said, I made it up.
Oh, there was a controversy at the Big Bang Theory because...
I'm sorry, a what?
An innovative controversy. At Futurama, the joke was just to make up nonsense that sounded like science. So like David Cohen had something about graviolis. There was some tiny particle that carried gravitation, and it was called a gravioli. So I thought that would be appreciated at the Big Bang Theory, because I figured you don't need to look on TV to know the real thing. You look on your internet, But that was not a view shared with the other writers on the Big Bang Theory, and they were like, "We thought you were going to tell us what was really true." And I said, well, okay, but anybody can find out what's true. I mean, new old things that are true. You have to be really smart to find out new things that are true, and you young people will do that. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
So my students very much enjoy the jokes that are in these shows. They talk about laughing quite a lot, and that humor can really help people connect to mathematics. But one of the things my students complain about is some of the stereotypes on the show. So for example, we have Professor Frink, who is on The Simpsons, and we have Professor Farnsworth, who is on Futurama, and we have Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, and you could all say that they are socially inept, and some of them mad scientists. So how would you respond to those critiques?
As you can see, we are incredibly socially successful, not at all. And those are lies.
I mean, the basic mechanism of The Simpsons and Futurama is that many of the characters start as the most obvious stereotypes of whatever they're supposed to be, just to give people a starting point so they understand the show. And then over the years, you try to make the character weirder, stranger, more of a specific individual. But that's sort of the the process reason behind it. It doesn't really relieve us of any guilt for doing it that way.
Yeah, I used to think that the best response to questions like that was to come up with some ingenious excuse along the lines of, well, I don't know, comedy has been about types since the Commedia dell'arte, or comedy is about perceiving flaws and no one would laugh. It was about a bunch of well-adjusted people. But now the new challenge, I think, for me, is not to come up with some weaselly excuse and just say, yeah, that's too bad, and people should try and do better. And if you can come up with a show that doesn't do that, you should. That would be great.
And
It's the John McEnroe defense.
You like the defensive thing better?
No, I'm saying that's a fine defense. It's John
Okay.
McEnroe defense.
You think that's also defensive? Okay.
so more broadly beyond your shows, how do you feel about the representation of mathematics and mathematicians in Hollywood?
It sucks.
I've been complaining about this for decades, I believe now. Every mathematician in a movie has to be crazy. It has to be John Nash, because you're not going to watch a whole fictional movie about Andrew Wiles, because he's not crazy. They're all inept. They're all wacky. Every single one of them.
Hey, I have an idea for a biographical movie.
Anyone read Presumed Innocent? And I'm assuming the movie's like this too. In Presumed Innocent, they mention very early on that one of the characters, and it's a murder mystery, is a mathematician. Okay, game over.
To side with Ken, actually, I've often frequently complained also that mathematical ability is often presented as a magic power in movies and TV shows, where you'll see like A Beautiful Mind, and there'll be numbers on the wall, and the ones that are important will light up to show you what he is thinking. And so it's not that there's no process involved. It's straight from the,
Wait, you don't see those numbers?
But yeah, it's just like, it presents it as this magic ability where I want the answer and it glows on the wall, and there's no process to get there, which I think is maybe demoralizing to young people who might want to study math, because they say, oh, I don't have that magic power.
I think displaying thinking of any kind in pictures is really hard. And there was a movie that came out, I think it was called Don't Think Twice or Just Don't Think, about improv. And similarly, you kind of can't show people doing improv. Like, you can show people thinking and then saying something funny, but it doesn't really convey it. I don't say you can't, but I've yet to see it done satisfactorily. I've yet to see like a good movie which shows how someone comes up with a story or a symphony or a mathematical insight or a comedic idea. I think it's a real puzzler. It's a mind bender how you would show that.
I think the depiction of scientists in movies is the biggest scandal in Hollywood right now. I can't think of a bigger problem. Challenge all Hollywood producers to work on it like I am.
So do you think that some of these stereotypes add to the mistrust of science and scientists, especially from the American public? And regardless of that, what do you think your responsibility is, if any, on these broader societal issues? Some of you have already talked about that.
Well, I think actually the things have changed a fair amount, where because of people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, that nerds are actually now regarded as heroes, or people you really want to emulate, and you see that in fiction too. So and The Simpsons, my defense is always, everyone's an idiot. Like, the hero's Homer, he's the worst of just about anybody on the show. Professor Frink is at least smart and nice, and so I would say I'd rather be a friend of Frink's than I would be of Homer's.
But Homer has a lot of fun.
Any other comments on those issues?
Well, people love movies for some reason people love movies for some reason, obviously, because you can see a man fly through outer space. It's not a puzzle why people love movies, but people love movies where where there's one bad guy who's thinking about what'll happen next, and a good guy who just does it without thinking. And the moral is, you should do it without thinking. And I don't know why that is. I think maybe because people are bummed out that so much in their lives they have to do it by thinking, so they like to fantasize. What if they could just do it without thinking and be like, I'll just pop my boss in the nose with my fist. But in fact, you think about it a lot, and you think, well, the results would be bad, so I won't do it. But then in the movie, he pops the boss in the nose with the fist, and he steals his spaceship or space dog. So I think there's a certain like drama seems to like we give our passions and our emotions play when we're entertained, but people need to realize don't do that in real life because there's a reason why you don't do it. And that may be something that maybe one of the things we could have is not just different kinds of movies, but more sophistication about the difference between movies and real life and politics and stuff like that.
How's that? Tom Cruise movies are always like glorifying mavericks, and it's like you do things by the book. It's like there's a reason people write those books. They have the instructions for how you do the things.
I'll make a very quick. Here's my defensive statement about Futurama, which is, despite the stereotypes and all, we generally did make an attempt to portray science and math in a positive way, where you could tell, I think, that the writers actually had a passion for the things we were writing about, and we were not belittling them or making fun of them. We were using them as part of the plot. We were even using them to solve the problems, as you saw sometimes with Ken's theorem or whatever. So we did try to make science the hero often, as opposed to just the villain, which you often also see in Hollywood stuff, where, our episode about genetic engineering talked about some of the good aspects of genetic engineering, for example, which there are if you have a horrible disease. So we tried to at least explore some of these things and use them as opposed to just making them the villain all the time.
Right. And one of the things I like about comedy, and comedy gets no respect, is thinking of life in terms of heroes and villains is number one, really dumb, and number two, really bad, because it encourages you to like kill everyone who's not you because you assume you're the hero and they're all the villains. And comedy is something that can let you say, oh, well, I guess we're all flawed humans, and scientists are not perfect, and people who are make decisions by the seat of their pants, they're not perfect either.
That's good.
I think that answered the question,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. So one might classify some of these references. Simon talked about this. David, you just talked about this. Some of the references are throwaway jokes. They're in the background. They go by very quickly. Others are used to contextualize the characters, and we've heard reference to. Sometimes it's used to showcase that a character is quite intelligent, and other times it's used to showcase that the character doesn't know a lot about that, say, academic field, but perhaps they have street smarts or bumbling Homer smarts or similar. And then still others of these references are major plot lines. So what's your favorite kind of reference to put into the show?
Mine is the thing. It was Jeff that actually came up with those numbers for the attendance figures, and you hope somebody will make something out of them, and that Simon has a book where he talks about them. I just find wonderful.
Someone asked me to come up with those numbers. I have no idea what numbers are good, and I'm the guy who studied math. So we went to the computer guy, and then he suddenly knew them all.
Yeah.
I still want to know. Yeah. So about this number of Mersenne primes is the same.
Yeah.
As that's why you put those together.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah. he didn't. Yeah, I think Simon mentioned that there's this question: are the first two, like, is there a correspondence between the first two kinds, the Mersennes and the perfects? And yeah, there is. I got a good proof for it. I wrote it down in the margin of my script at the time, but then the PAs recycled it. So
Go ahead.
I actually don't like the background references. I'm sorry to say that, and I know I'll make a lot of enemies. No, I guess I've already made enemies of it already. So,
Luckily, none of them can fight, so don't worry about it.
occasionally, when it actually has some kind of point, it seems like, okay, well, that's more like mathematics. When Bender regretted losing the uncountably infinite bunch of guys he was hanging out with, we had a scene that we wrote. And it was a good scene. It was funny, and it had to do with mathematics, and maybe it would have been incomprehensible, to be fair. About the Simpsons had the Googleplex. We had an Aleph Nullplex, which had countably, infinitely many screens. But we didn't say that. But we had written a further scene where Fry says, well, what do you need that many screens for? And the professor said, well, it's still not enough to show Rocky and all its sequels. And, which, suggested, okay, there's uncountably many Rocky films. And then we were going to get into the question of how were those movies produced? I mean, Stallone has to be on screen for some amount of time in each one of them. And the production time is limited, leaving aside the budget. So he's got to be on screen in almost all of them for well under. Anyway, this is the way the discussion
Doesn't the very act of a sequel imply like there's accountability to it, though?
Yes, it does. That was part of the
impossible
joke.
for that joke? Okay,
Yes.
yeah, all right.
Anyway,
I get it.
It went on for a while, but it was tied in with things people would understand, like how little screen time Stallone is getting, and the fact that most of them are really about Adrian and things like that. Well, it got cut and limited to a background. Well, did we say the word? No, it was just a background joke.
I will say. Oh, go ahead. Keep going ahead.
I hated that.
Actually, don't bother. We don't need that kind of negativism here. I was just going to say that, as we've kind of suggested, it was a general rough rule that when we do these very mathematical jokes, that they're in the background, and so if you don't get it, it doesn't interrupt the flow of the show. But you can kind of see some of my favorite jokes in the places where that's violated, because that means I said, all right, forget about the majority of the audience for a second because I want to hear the joke. So that an example that would be that horse racing joke we saw, which was you change the outcome by measuring it. Or there's another one I always remember, which was I had a conversation with you in the room. Do you know what I'm getting at with the 4 million lines of basic?
Right. And what I'm noticing now is that I'm liking this story about you in real life, following your heart and not figuring out how many people would like it, and going against what I said earlier, that these movies are a bad guide for life. Because in real life, David followed his heart for math, and he put stuff on which nobody liked. The show was canceled immediately, but he's happy.
No, but I'll tell this. I'm going to clean up the final line of this story.
Go ahead.
Make it PG-13 instead of
Because some of
the original.
Some of the audience members are 11.
Yeah, the original comment by Eric was R-rated, so you can fill it in yourself. But we had this our equivalent of the holodeck on Star Trek, for those of you who are familiar, which can simulate anything and to an absurd level of detail. And so we had our characters in the hollow shed or whatever. Amy, the characters Kif and Amy, they were on a romantic date, and it was all being simulated. And we wanted to make a little joke about how they had achieved this very specific simulation. And Eric pitched this joke. Kif says, "I programmed it myself. 4 million lines of basic."
Yeah, and what it was a pony. Amy is like, "That's a lovely pony." And because I programmed it myself, 4 million lines of basic.
So then I said in the room, well, I laughed out loud, and then I said, but on the other hand, the basic language hasn't been used in 25 years, and no one, I said 99% of the audience is not going to get that, and Eric said, "Screw them."
And what happened to that joke? The joke was cut, right?
It was in there.
The joke was in there. So David,
you won me over with that argument.
David followed his heart, and I followed my heart.
So that's an
I would
example.
like to say, as a tribute to this audience, I don't think I have ever seen that Heisenberg uncertainty joke get a bigger laugh than it did from this crowd. So we should just aim everything at you guys.
So we've already talked about a number of the episodes where the mathematics runs through the plot line, but let's go to Mathlete's Feet, which was relatively recent in 2015, where Lisa and others are on the Springfield Math Olympiad team. Any comments from Simpsons writers about making that episode?
That one, in terms of the segues right from Heisenberg uncertainty, the fact that we were observed by Simon Singh and getting credit for making math episodes led us to make another math episode, and that was Mathlete's Feet. So we had Lisa on the mathletic team, and I think that the solution to a problem was the way Homer's face looked, wasn't it?
Oh, right.
The hair, yes.
I can't remember it.
The hair.
Yeah, drawing the 9 different triangles.
Right.
This reminds me of I've been several times to these trivia nights where it's like Futurama trivia at a local comic book store, and the fans have these teams, and we have a team, and we lose.
Yes, I also say, like, nobody ever wants to see us win. Always on the fan side.
So one of the themes that also runs through the Big Bang Theory is this theory of everything and whether theoretical physics is ever going to get anywhere. Any comments on that theme, which runs across like multiple episodes?
Oh, I think theoretical physics will explain everything before the decade is out. I just think people are getting smarter. They're building larger computers. I don't know. What was the question exactly? What do I think there's a theory of everything?
Well, I was just, I was
will we
talking
come
about
up with it in the show?
Or just address that it's across something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose the main character originally or he was sort of the antagonist, but one of the characters that people like is Sheldon, and he's just very, very arrogant. So he's trying to figure out everything, and if you're not a theoretical physicist, he thinks you're a dope. So that just seems like an interesting kind of bombastic, funny idiot character. We have a physics professor at UCLA, David Salzberg, who's not a bombastic idiot. In fact, is a humble and smart guy. And is he here? No.
You said UCLA.
He's not here, but that's how humble he is. And he has proved actual things and invented actual things, which we have the characters do on the show. So if we say, David, please come up with a theory of everything for the finale, he might do it. And then we'll put it in the show and take credit for it.
Are there any mathematical moments to look forward to in the shows or offshoots such as the games or other media?
I was going to mention if The Simpsons ever ends, I wanted to end it by having the last episode turn into the Christmas pageant that started the first episode, so that the whole series is like a Mobius strip, that it's never got a beginning and it's never got an end.
And then we can keep working. Episode 2.
Isn't that just a circle?
Depends on the plot twist.
Do you have any words of advice for students?
Run.
It's a very non-representative group of math students here, but I think many of us have some regrets also that we could not do both our academic stuff and our funny stuff. So, there's not a wrong choice if you're thinking about different options in your life, and you can try one thing for a while, like Jeff Westbrook, and then try something else.
Yeah. Sorry, I want to be very positive here. I do want to come back to something that Sarah was talking about before. I mean, certainly my experience, and I was a theoretical computer scientist, not a mathematician, which to a mathematician is an important distinction. A lot of what I did was very collaborative with other people, and a lot of the most fun times I had doing that was just sitting around with 2 or 3 other people and a whiteboard and just kind of putting stuff up and kidding around about how great our theorems were and what a big difference it would make. And when you proved that if you could have a 2-item list, I worked for a week on a 2-item list, proving that if you, with a certain probabilistic distribution on the items, you could get the minimum possible number of swaps, similar to your pancake thing. But so that is fun, and I don't think you should. I don't think the idea of that it's true that mathematicians are sad, lonely people in their rooms all by themselves.
Can I tell a very quick story that relates to what you're saying? That when I came, I had been in graduate school, and then I took time off and was writing all that stuff. Finally, I got hired to do some stuff, and then I got hired on The Simpsons. And 2 years had passed, I think, since I had written this paper that was mentioned earlier about pancake flipping. It finally got published, and it was written by me and my advisor, Manuel Blum, who's a famous computer scientist. And I brought in a reprint of this paper from the Journal of Discrete Applied Mathematics, and I brought it into the Simpsons writers' room and showed it to everybody. And Ken said, "Oh yeah, Jeff Westbrook and I had a paper in that last month." I can't be the only guy at the Simpsons with a paper in the Journal of Discrete Applied Mathematics. Anyway, so these two have collaborated on a publication, right?
Yeah. When I
cheer up over there.
I know, God, you keep throwing these questions get thrown at me.
I remember we sat around putting stuff on the board and making jokes, and then the paper was really lousy.
That is my most referenced paper in my entire career. I think I have the most citations for that paper of anything, so you should feel good. You should feel very good.
I must have the same number of citations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think Ken just proved another theorem.
You know what the greatest contribution I actually made to mathematics is? Patrick, Verone, and David and I, when we were working on the first series, thought we might want to have a scientist as a guest star, and we thought about using Terence Tao. And we called him up because he was here, and we went out to lunch with him. Very nice guy. It ended up we never found an application for him, but he left to go back to his office. And I realized he'd left his computer on the floor of the restaurant. So I grabbed it and ran after him, and got him, before he reached the end of the block, I handed it to him. That's the biggest contribution.
Any other final words from anybody?
I'll say something.
I was just going to say this is a National Science Foundation program, and I went to a National Science Foundation math camp after 11th and 12th grades. Jealous. And it really did put me where I am today. I mean, it really was a huge thing, and I appreciate it. And with the de-emphasis on education by certain areas of the government, I can't think of anything more important, especially now that the Cold War is starting again.
And apparently we're going to solve everything in 10 years, so better hurry.
I'll say a couple of things. Number one, that I grew up in a house where science was fun because both my parents were biologists, and that's sort of the spirit we tried to get in Futurama. And I just wish we could get that across more in education. And this is something that Sarah is particularly known for, but just that it's not a chore. It's fabulous fun if it's something you love. And I think that's where we can help a little bit by portraying it as this is fun and exciting, and try not discourage kids from it. And then the other thing I'll say, this relates to what you were saying about checking the internet, which is that because we are just jamming this stuff in there because it's stuff we love, we do kind of troll around the internet afterwards, and we are hoping people will notice it, and sometimes they don't, but apparently sometimes they do, which is why we're here today, and that does make us very happy. So thank you guys for noticing all these things we hid in there.
And by the way, just quickly to Sarah, those 3 funny numbers, we stuck those in the show because Sarah had come for a visit that particular day, so we thought, oh, well, let's honor our visiting mathematician. So if you want some numbers in the show, come by and see us.
Along with my colleague Andrew Nestler to give proper reference to him. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for many wonderful mathematical moments and making us laugh, both here and in the shows. So we look forward to more in the years to come. What I'd like to do is we have just a few minutes if you have some questions from the audience. Right over here.
Hi. I'm just really curious to know, what's your favorite Simpsons episode?
Okay, and I'm going to repeat the question for the camera. What's your favorite Simpsons episode? And you can choose not to answer, obviously.
Yes, I haven't liked any of them.
Yeah, the last one.
Favorite that we wrote, or that it out of the whole series? Is it how?
Doesn't have to be mathematical, just anything that you liked.
Well, here's a mathematical one. You should check out Girls Just Want to Have Sums, which is one we wrote probably 10 years ago. I don't know, something like that. It was just after the Harvard president had come out opining that there might, maybe, there aren't that many women in science just because they're just bad at science. So we thought, let's tackle that question. And we had Principal Skinner make a very similar statement about the girls doing math at the elementary school.
This is the same Harvard president that lost Harvard $10 billion in the financial crisis. So
yeah.
maybe he could have done a little more math.
There was an episode, and it was when you were doing it. You may remember what it is. I don't remember the whole plot, but at the end, Marge has a speech that goes along the lines of, what I learned was one person can make a difference, but most of the time they shouldn't.
That's the one where she got violence banned in cartoons.
Okay.
Yeah.
That statement struck me. I said, that actually changed the way I thought slightly. Seriously, and there are examples, I mentioned that because there are examples of jokes that have changed the way I've thought. That's a good joke. That's it.
I saw your hand over there.
Yes. Without answering the typical answer, can you complete the joke? Why was 6 afraid of 7?
Was it 7, 8, 9?
Wait, the correct setup is why was 5 afraid of 6, isn't it? No. 6. Oh, no, you're right.
Right.
There, I've done it. I've given an unexpected answer.
Or why
The
is
Socratic method is to throw it back to the questioner, right?
All right. Jeff?
Yeah, I have one question. My husband tells me I'm funny and I have a PhD in computer science, so I was wondering, how do you become a writer of one of the jokes?
Well, how many papers do you have in discrete applied math at this point?
We just by writing scripts, we all wrote spec scripts to get on. And if you really, want to be a writer, you choose a show that you think is really good, and you write several samples. And there's not really any magic to it. I was thinking it is true, the stuff about how movies really never portray discovery accurately. I was thinking of like The Imitation Game, where he's in a bar watching people dance and going, "Oh, I've got the idea for my supercomputer." No, I don't think that's how he came up with it.
Right up here.
Do you think Homer could ever become a great mathematician if he takes the crayon back out of his head?
We did one where the premise was that Homer was really smart, and then he had a crayon lodged in his head, and that made him stupid. I don't advise trying it. Some people think that that's not, that they were mad because they say that's not really why he is who he is. But I think anybody that drinks as much as Homer does would be pretty stupid.
Hand back there.
Is Futurama coming back?
Usually when I say definitely not, that's when it comes back. So I'm going to say definitely not coming back. But we did, as someone mentioned, there's an audio episode out as an episode of the Nerdist podcast for anyone who hasn't heard it. And it's pretty good, I think. So check it out. And that is new.
Over here.
Do you explain the jokes to the actors, or just kind of let them have it?
You have to explain the jokes to the actors, sure. If often the actors are very smart and funny, they don't need it explained to them. But if they don't understand it, we would explain it to them, sure.
But sometimes they just say the words, right?
No, they understand it. By the time, you explain that, you can make a joke. You can make a joke about quantum chromodynamics without being able to teach a course in quantum chromodynamics. But you do have to know enough about it to know that it's a theory of how very small things explain how larger things behave, or something like that. So everybody has to get at least on the level of what the shape of the concept is, even if they don't know all the little gears inside the concept that make it work.
I have a question for Ken specifically. So you were talking about how there are specific jokes that you think I can never think of that. Do you have like an example of like one of your favorite jokes that you heard it and you're like, wow, like how did you think of that? Like, I can never think of that myself.
I believe I said at the moment I couldn't think of any. If you let me take 5 minutes and think.
Well, you said that more than 5 minutes ago.
I thought you said that Al's joke was also fit that bill or something.
I didn't say that was Al's joke.
Well, I don't know. But you were
I was
looking at it
asking
when
no,
you
I was
said
asking
it,
what episode it was in.
No, and it wasn't my joke.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was Swartzwelder's.
I can think. Yeah, I was just going to say
Swartzwelder.
At the Simpsons, the George Meyer and John Swartzwelder, people who were there when I was there, were two people who I think of as contributing a lot of these jokes where they come from a direction you could not have fathomed yourself. And I'm going to quote one, which I always remember from Swartzwelder, who wrote 59 episodes of The Simpsons, as he likes to point out to everybody. It was talking about this character had a tough upbringing. And he said it got changed a little bit in the air, but he said, I had a tiny apartment. I grew up above a bowling alley and below another bowling alley.
And I will quote one from George Meyer, which is Homer is sitting alone watching television, and we hear the audio, and it's some of the Three Stooges. It's just clearly Three Stooges. And Homer looks, and he's by himself, and he says, Mo is their leader. I don't know how to convey it. I don't know whether that sounds like, when I say that, whether you believe me. There is no way, none. I could, in a million years, if I was looking for something for Homer to say at that point, I never could have written that.
It's funny, the trick to some of these jokes about the thought process of stupidity is that it has to be stupidity that thinks it's thinking, but isn't. and you have to yourself be at least half or not more stupid in order to be able to observe that stupidity in yourself and write the joke.
Wait a minute, though. That suggests that these are all jokes are about stupidity.
No, I said that, but I think that one is. Okay. I think that is a particularly, Mo is their leader, seems to be sort of catching the stupid person in the moment of insight.
Let me give you another one, also George's, and I think we probably all had this experience where it's always George's. It's another TV audio joke. And what you hear is just the announcer says, "We now return to the John Philip Sousa story." And then you hear a voice say, "Freeze, Sousa!"
You could make that joke.
No.
Yeah, you could.
No, I absolutely could never make
No, the way you would make that joke is you'd realize it's setting up the expectation as something even remotely to do with John Philip Sousa. Don't you think?
Well, that's what happened, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm capable of doing it.
Oh, you're capable of more than you knew. Believe in your heart.
And that will be a great message to end on. Mark, if you'll go to my last slide, which is a slide from the National Science Foundation that looks at all the college majors who majored in computers, mathematics, and statistics, and what they went on to do for their careers, all sorts of things, including the arts and entertainment that is just off of Eric's shoulder up there. So I hope you are inspired to watch these shows and support them, but also try your best at mathematics. Thank you for being great sports today.